guarantee, as well as the cost of first book award. And it's about to be adapted for television for Channel 4. You said it. So obviously the book has done numbers already in hardback, and it's about to reach a whole new audience in paperback. So I mean, you know, might work for your first book, your debut novel, and you know, it's hard to imagine that it could have gone any better for your first book. And now it's going into so many people's hands again in paperback. I hope you've had a chance to reflect on what you've achieved. But I wondered that now it's been so long after, you know, the forensic editorial process of rereading the book. Have you read it as a physical book and just thought, rah?
No. You never do that. And there was a BBC Sounds adaptation, which you missed up with it. And people were saying that it's really good, so they kind of like adapted it and chopped it up. And then people were like, yeah, have you listened to it? And they said, no, there was absolutely no way that I could listen to it or read it or anything. I just stayed very far away. Yeah, and I looked to be adapting it, and people I'm working with are like, so have you read it? I'm like, no, I can just remember bits. So yeah, no, that's yeah, maybe one. I won't. No, I won't do it one day. That was
But the book has been incredibly important to the current landscape of British publishing for reasons that I think we'll come to in a bit. But in case people have been under a rock or like idiots and didn't buy the hardback and are waiting to read their paperback copy, could you give us a summary of what Queenie is actually about?
Yes.
I know you've not read it for a while.
Yeah, I can remember. No, so I wrote it when I was 26 and I'm now 30, which is why some bits are patchy, but it's mostly there. So it's about a young black woman living in South London, and she thinks that her life is fine, and she thinks that everything's going well. She has this white boyfriend with whom she lives, and everything is kind of as is. And they don't have a break. Well, they do have a breakup, but she kind of takes it as a break. And then she spends that time still longing for him and like reflecting on the relationship and having to figure out who she is, kind of in order to get back to the person that is good enough for him. But she also does lots of things on the side that she shouldn't be doing, and she gets herself into a lot of trouble. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell, in a non-activity nutshell.
I mean, I'll try and keep our chat spoiler-free as much as possible in case you haven't read it. But just to touch on some general points before we get into sort of some of the nitty-gritty themes. But as I say, it's really important to the publishing landscape currently, and the book kind of does feel like an investigation into modern British womanhood, and modern black British womanhood in particular. And you know, there weren't really any books out there like this that featured a character like Queenie before your book came onto the scene. I mean, like, down to the jacket. Like, I had never seen a jacket like that. I remember when the cover image was announced. You know, shout out to the designer and the name of the designer. But when the book was marketed, I'm going to use the BJ phrase, Bridget Jones. It was sort of marketed as a black Bridget Jones. And I know you came from a marketing background, so was that something you were conscious of, or is that how you thought of the book when it first came about, or how did you feel about that comparison?
That was fine for me, because when I was writing it, I was aware that there weren't many books like it, and I was in the industry, publishing industry, and I was like, I don't know how they're going to take this. So I should set up straight from me now. Sorry for this. So I don't know how they're going to take this, and so it was almost me being like, if they have issues understanding what it could be like, and that it should be for a commercial audience, then that's how it should be sort of positioned. So it was kind of like my trick to get it in.
Yeah.
It worked. Yeah. And then all the reviews were like, it's not really like that, but yeah, cool. And some people said it's better, but I'm not gonna.
And I mean, that's a common thing in publishing, isn't it? Having comparison titles so that the book can be sold in and people like understand and obviously now your book has become that for authors coming up behind you who now finally, particularly if they're Black British authors like us, they have a book that's wildly successful that they can say, well, you know, it's like Queenie, not like Bridget Jones. So that's incredible.
Thank you.
So you see how I have to...
Well, that was the plan, because it was all sort of, I mean, it was about, like, writing a book was about being like, we should be seen, like Black women should be seen, and that we have different layers, and that we contain multitudes, and that we have different existences and different ways of being, but also that books about our lives can sell. And obviously, books around slavery are important, but that's not the only existence that we should have in the publishing landscape and the film landscape.
Yeah. And I was going to ask about sort of the genesis of the story itself, because I know you bagged a writing retreat at Jojo Moyes' house, which is, you know, just as you do. How did that come about? And when you started working on Queenie, was that a story that you already had bubbling away and you're like, that's what I'm going to write when I go to this retreat? Or was it something that came about as you sat down to start?
So I applied for it because I didn't really have the space to write like where I lived. And so I worked in publishing, and I was just, my existence was very much waking up, going to work, coming home, going to bed, and sleeping. And I was like, I just need to get away. And also, I've been in South London throughout most of my life, so I was like, maybe try something different. For this retreat, and when I got it, I drove there, borrowed my friend's car, and I drove like 2.5 hours, having not driven since I passed my test.
Where is her place?
Saffron Walden.
Oh yes, I know it well.
Well, it's not on the space as well. And I was like, oh, how can I do this? But I was like determined, I was like, I'm going to get there. And everyone was like, just get onto the motorway and stay in the first lane. And then somehow I was just in the third lane, and I was like, well, we're here. But I got there, and I got there in one piece, so it was great. But when I was thinking, like, what do you want to say? Like, that's the main thing, like, what do you want to say? And I wanted to say that while Black women are living our lives, our existences are harder, because we have so much to face, and we have so many veneers that we have to put on, and so much we have to navigate. And I was just like, so in saying that, like, how are you going to show that? And I was like, we'll do it through the year of the life of someone who understands what you've gone through, what your friends have gone through, what some of your family members have gone through. And so, yeah, I think that's why so many people find it so relatable, because I was like, well,
there's an element of the book that lots of different people can relate to different elements of the story.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, thinking about stories like Bridget Jones, that sort of carry a through line from classic British women's fiction, like Pride and Prejudice or whatever. Obviously that's overtly based on Pride and Prejudice. But with Queenie and the success of that book, it sort of allows that through line to divert to include people like us, which is amazing. But in terms of that, I wanted to talk about one of the key themes of the book, which is sex and dating. A lot of women's fiction centres romantic relationships as aspirational. I mean, I know that's sort of the kind of thing that I write.
Good for you.
Yeah, because Queenie's showing a darker, sort of more difficult side of the dating scene, particularly for Black women. Obviously, that's a theme that you were looking to explore. But how Queenie uses sex, it's sort of the way a lot of young women are potentially at the moment, because it's sort of easily accessible. You've got apps on your phone, and it can be empowering, but maybe it starts to feel like an obligation rather than something that's a source of pleasure. And you're really shining a light on that in the book. And we're seeing it in contemporary fiction a lot with there's Cat Person, or whatever, the short story from the New Yorker that blew up, and sort of normal people, Sally Rooney's book. But with Queenie, we get to see it in relation specifically to Black women, a Black woman's experience, as you said. And you're really capturing the differences there, because she's objectified a lot of the time by men, particularly by white men. So how important was that for into, were you deliberately looking at them? It sounds like you were trying to shine a light on that. Or was it something that just came about with Queenie's character as you were writing?
It was something that I felt like I needed to talk about it because I met so many girls like us who had been having those experiences and they were either doing something wrong or that was just the way that they would exist. They would exist for the sexual pleasure of these men, and this is because how they were spoken to or spoken about. And also just comparing themselves to their white friends and being like, oh well, that person's, and I've done it as well, you know, like when my friends have been like, oh, so I'm going on a date, and this is like after a date, and I'm like, oh, like I don't even get asked to go on dates.
Yeah,
Those are ways that people approach me. And so that obviously, you know, that you turn it into, you internalize that, and you turn it into something that's wrong with you. And I really wanted people, because I think one thing that the book has done is make people talk about stuff and realise that they're not alone in things.
Yes.
And I think that I only started to understand where I fit into society when I started talking to people like me who are experiencing the same thing. Because when your frames of reference are people who aren't like you, you just think that your existence is wrong. And that you're not good enough to as good as them. And that's not the truth. That's just the way that I guess the society that we live in and how we're seen and objectified. And that is because of the depictions of us in the media and in advertising and in books that we're either not seen or we're highly sexualized or we're the manly to all the magical ego, you know? So I think like when you don't see yourself in those things, you find yourself invisible or you try and fit into those things, which also doesn't work.
Yeah, because you've got sort of a direct comparison. I think the way you talk about the use of apps and sort of the immediacy of how people can contact you and speak to you in this anonymous sort of way, and the differences between how Queenie is approached and how, say, her white friends are approached in those ways, it's, you know, it's startling, where it should be, but I think, as you say, it's really bringing to light how, you know, what the differences are in those landscapes for different women in modern times, modern Britain. But I mean, obviously, as I say, I can't lie, like, the romantic in me wanted Queenie to have some sort of romantic, redemptive moment. You know, was that something that you were tempted to do, or did you ever have a draft where, like, she found some in shining armour, or like a not all men kind of moment? No, that was not
No, I just think, well, I think, like, you know, it's about, it's not really a spoiler, there's only a dramatic happens at the end. But it's about her, right? This whole journey is about her. It's not about the men, it's not about her family, it's not about her work, it's about her understanding who she is. And about having to go on a really rocky journey to get there. And so I don't think it would have been realistic for her to fall into a really amazing relationship with someone, because I don't think that she would be in the place to do that.
And that's kind of not what she needed, was it? I mean, she's not looking for redemption really in a romantic sense. But anyway, so in terms of Queenie's sexual encounters within the story, they are kind of a route to some of the other themes that you
Okay.
I know, sorry. But mental health, and sort of how she navigates, you know, there's a through line sort of about how she's navigating her mental health within the story, and sort of how she does handle that. Part of it is how she doesn't, she sort of has a focus, for example, on the Black Lives Matter movement, which is great, but it was interesting to me how she cared more about, like, other people's, other black bodies than her own. I thought you handled that really well, kind of the fact that she is a compassionate person, but she doesn't really turn that compassion inwards until later on in the story. And was it something that you were looking to do sort of, I'm sure you were looking to do, to investigate the sort of mental health journey that Queenie's going on in the story, and almost how she uses her body maybe as a deflection from some of those issues and how they manifest physically.
Yeah, so I have a deep understanding of panic attacks and depression, and it was always worse when it first started happening to me. I didn't really understand what was going on, and this is a common occurrence, and that I think black women spend so much time suppressing everything and being strong that when these things are happening, and it's so obvious what's happening, it's not obvious to us what's going on. And I remember when I was having all of these symptoms, not breathing, stomach aches and feeling lightheaded all the time, and not sleeping, I went to the doctor and explained, and I was sort of like, this has been going on for ages, I don't know what's happening, and the doctor said, oh, you have a stomach bug. And so gave me loads of medication for that, which made everything a lot worse. And if I just had known that what was going on was anxiety or depression, it would have been a very different story. And so that's why I wanted to weave that into the novel, because it just made sense. And most of the feedback I get from girls like us is that they've had that too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, because Queenie comes into contact with health professionals, obviously when we first encounter her, she's got her feeling spirits in a medical situation. And I think that's so brilliant, the way you depicted the differences, the assumptions that there are around medical interactions with us as black women versus maybe what they might be for other people. But yeah, I mean, done. Good job.
I did an event in Leeds this week, and one of the women in the audience, she was a white woman, and she said that she worked in sexual health clinics, and she wanted to know how she and the people she worked with could do better to facilitate black women, because she understood that black women were being treated differently.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have the answer. I was like, I'm an author, and I have a marketing background, so I can't tell you that. But I thought it was really interesting that she asked that, because she was like, I recognise it, and I've looked at the numbers and I see that black women and childbirth, like those numbers are important, so it is something that does very much happen. I think it's something that we, again, these are things that we accept for ourselves and we internalise and think it's our fault.
And I suppose because we don't have a comparison, we not necessarily, I mean, if it's not something that we discuss with other black women, or might not even sort of stop and question, was that interaction coloured, ironically, by a black woman? So I think it's really useful to have sort of books that deal with a lot of different things, but like a book like Queenie that does bring this kind of issue to light, but not in a sort of wacky over the head lecturing sort of way. But moving on, sort of, just touching on Queenie's childhood, there could have been a very different novel in a way about Queenie's childhood, because of what we learn about, without spoiling, what we learn as to what had gone on for her in her childhood. Was that a backstory that you developed as you were writing, or did you have it in mind from the start? And how much of it was sort of making sure not to have the book be like a misery memoir, because you are touching on some dark themes, particularly in her childhood?
I think it's that I know a lot of people who have had similar childhoods, and that my childhood wasn't great, and so but I'm also not miserable, because I think that there is laughter as deflection from pain. Sorry, I mean I'm not miserable, seriously. So there is that, but there is also that you can have those things in your childhood, and you can just go on and live a very what is like a sort of half a life, because you're suppressing a lot of it. But I think that there was again, like when I was writing Queenie, I did not plan anything. It was just sort of like who is this girl and how can she? I think I started with like, what is her star sign? That was like my main thing, and then I was like went up from there, and then I was like, what is her star sign? She's a Leo. She was on like, I'm a Cancer, so I would look after her. I would not be her. So that was kind of like I worked out from there. But I think that I know a lot of black women who I talk to them, and their relationship with their mum is really fragmented. Some the relationships with dads, if they are, and I really hate to say that because it was like playing into like a stigma, but like I bet it really is like an existence that I understand myself and have seen a lot. And so thinking about who she was going to be and where that all came from, she kind of had to be that person, because again, it being about value. This is a young woman who didn't understand the value of herself in her childhood. And so she was never going to understand it as an adult until she got help doing so.
And like I know I have been touching some of the darker elements of the book, but this book is funny, laugh out loud funny. I listened back, I know you didn't listen to the BBC sound, but I listened to the audio that I read it, and then I listened to the book again just recently because I knew I was doing this, and the interactions, particularly with her friends, Jessica, who's like one of my favourite characters of recent times, genuinely. They're just so funny, and their interactions are so funny. And, you know, having friends like Cassandra, who, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but those friends who you kind of you begin to question, like, do I actually like this person? Are we actually friends? But I wanted to ask about the idea of disparate friendships, sort of friends you make in different walks of life. So, like, she's kind of got her day one friend, she's got her work wife kind of friend, friends from uni. Is that something, again, I mean, I'm guessing that was something you're drawing from your own life, or did you want Queenie to have lots of different aspects to her friendship groups? How did that come about, her friends?
So she's got 3 key best friends, and so one from school, one from university, and one from work. And I think that we do all pick up different people as we go along. But I also wanted, she's very selfish. And I wanted her to make herself the main character in these people's lives.
I mean, she does call them the corgis, which I'm glad they pull her up on, so I was like, are you saying my dog? Like,
And so I really love that because I think that, I've seen black women as secondary characters in everything, to where I was making myself a secondary character in different people's lives. So I was like, no, Queenie's going to be that high I'm here. I don't know, so I picked her up from here, but it's about me now. And so I also wanted to be from different places so she could then bring them together and we could get these 3 different people who had different viewpoints and different understandings of her, but then it all came to the same understanding of her. And so that was why I joined them all up, because also when you join your friends up, we don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. Well, it read like you were having fun writing her interactions. And then, of course, there's also Queenie's family and the interaction with her grandparents and her cousin and her auntie. They're really humorous as well, but they're sort of shot through with pathos and obviously love, particularly when we see it unfolding with Queenie and her mum. And there is so much going on with her interactions, and as you kind of mentioned, Queenie's dad isn't around. Did you feel sort of a pressure or a consciousness around how you're depicting a black family situation, or having Queenie as a flawed character, as a black woman? I guess what I'm saying is, did you think about your readership when you were writing the book? Did you have a particular reader in mind? Because there are moments that are kind of not explaining, but sort of the don't touch my hair, or what gentrification means for a particular community. They feel like they might be explaining things to a certain type of audience and relatable and a reflection of like a recognition for a different kind of audience. But did you have a readership in mind when you were writing?
You phrased that very well. So the first, I think it was like, write this for yourself, because I really needed to read that for myself, because I read so much, and as I said, I read loads of young adult fiction when I was growing up, and I was like, okay, I can see myself, because like my Rackman was always like, so that was really great. And then as I got into my 20s, it kind of fell off, and I was like, oh, I would like something. So that was for me, really. And also it was kind of like getting things out, I guess, because it was like all this stuff that we go through all the time. And I guess like fictionalising it is a way of just kind of like taking it out of yourself, but also not making it about you, so that you have to put all of your stuff on the page. But then also just thinking about how we just, I don't know, I think we need to, as a group of women, just to also like start talking about things. I think that's really important, because I know that it's been part of lots of groups, and people have been like, this is how to talk about this part of things, like what this person really did, so on and so forth. So that's really important. And then I think it was like the first like step was like, okay, this is for yourself, and the second was like, this is for people that you see, so people feel a bit less lonely and what they're going through and what they can talk learn about this existence in the way that someone who you might see on the
From an
bus.
authentic point of view.
Yeah, from exactly. Because when you went to the bus and like, have an understanding of how actually they're very different to what you have seen about someone like them on the news, for example. You know?
Were you ever tempted to write the book as a YA book? If you loved YA, and like I think I've read listened to an interview where you mentioned Louise Renison. Were you sort of thinking, ooh, maybe I can make this a YA book, or was it always intended for adults?
There was too much sex in it.
True, that's true. That's fine.
Yeah, I had to then write. I wrote a short story for something. Couldn't put any sex in there. I really struggled. So yeah, it could never have been.
True, yeah. My mind went with that. That's very true. So one thing that I did love about the book, as well as the humour mixed in with the pathos, when it came to Queenie's grandparents and their view of therapy, obviously at first they are not on board with the idea, should we say. But they also provide something really essential for Queenie. Obviously they provide her with a home when she needs it, a space to recover. Even the chores she gets given sort of allow her to have somebody else dictate what she needed to do, which is kind of something it felt like she needed before she goes into the therapy, like direct therapy. So in terms of the theme of therapy, that's something that you do depict. It's not something that necessarily is talked about within the Black community or seen as something that people would do. I've just started seeing a therapist myself. Yes, it's therapy. But I mean, it does sound like that was also something that was important for you to show that this is an option for people to explore.
Yeah, and I think I wonder, would you have been comfortable saying that in front of an audience had it not been for
Probably not. And I know you.
So it's really arrogant of me.
You thank the guys from the Read. Yeah. And I think listening to podcasts like that where they normalise the idea of going to therapy is also really, really, Is someone clapping? No.
But no, so I did want to do that because I think it's what I say to so many of us, because I think you get to a point where you're like, okay, I understand what my issues are, I understand maybe where they've come from, but understanding what your issues are does not fix the problem, because we need the tools to be able to, we also need the space to be able to get out of our heads and talk about the problem.
Yeah, the space is so important.
Right? And so I think that that's my main thing to everyone, is that I can listen to you and I can talk to you and I can care for you, but I can't give you those tools. So I think it was Queenie having to do that. And our grandparents weren't keen on that at all, obviously. My nan actually, weirdly the other day, told me to go to therapy. Doesn't even read the book, but she was like, I think you need to take some. I was like, yeah, I think you're right. So I think it's something that in our community, it's not something that is ever spoken about, because that conversation wouldn't really have happened with my nan for, it's only in like recent years that's something that I've been talking to her about. But I do think it's something that's absolutely vital for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like at the end, again, not spoiled, but there's a lovely tableau at the end with her tableau. Why did I say tableau? With her family. With sort of her family and friends, and I love that she didn't make that distinction. She just refers to them as her family. I don't know why I noticed that, but and she has a moment in the bathroom where she's talking to herself, sort of in the mirror in the bathroom stall, and it kind of feels like it is a cathartic moment. It felt almost like the book could be a manifesto for young women. Was that intentional, or what do you want people to take away from the book when they're reading? Have you thought about how you want them to feel by the end of the book, or what you want them to take away?
I don't know. I think I want everyone to feel differently, because I guess, whenever I will read it differently to you, because it's all our projections, right, on something. But I want people to feel less alone in it, and I want people to learn something from it, and whether or not or if it's someone who's like, I shouldn't touch a black woman's hair because they're around me.
There's nothing else people take that from.
Yeah, so I think it's very much that, and I just want people to do it. Because she had to be flawed, and she had to be quite irritating, and she had to be fragmented, but ultimately you kind of had to realise that she was still lovable and still worth valuing because she's just a person, and I guess we all are just trying to make our way through, you know, and like you don't know what's going on in someone's life. So as you go through the novel, you can see that she is just sort of like very calm on the surface. That you're in her head, and you know that she's like losing it. She's really spiraling. And so I think it's that it's like not knowing what is in someone's heart, but knowing that ultimately they are a good person.
How are we doing this time? Okay, sorry. And in terms of approaching your next writing project, are you writing that book? And if so, I don't want you to say what it is, obviously you may not want to do that, but do you feel a pressure to fit into a certain mould or write a certain type of narrative now that your first book has been so successful? Is there that pressure, or do you feel like a freedom, like I can write what I want? Kind of thing?
There was no freedom. No, it's hard, and it's taken me a lot longer to write the second novel, not just because I'm busy, but it's just because you sort of sit down and you're like, because when I was writing the first novel, I was like, I don't think anyone's going to read it. And so now I'm like, okay, so if people are reading it, and people will probably read the second one. So I'm like, seeing all these faces and being like, oh, I don't think it's funny enough. So that is...
So you can...
And so this is bringing people onto the stage. So there is pressure, but because you want it to be right and you want it to be good, because you want people to like understand that there is a standard. But I'm just, is my sister here? I think she's here, but she's no, is she? No, it's fine. But I am doing it, and it is hard. But I'd like to be more confident with it, and I think because I say
I feel like you can be quite. You've done pretty well.
But because I wrote Queenie when I was 25, 26, I think you have that confidence when you're that age to be like, I can do anything, I can write anything. And now I'm just like, also like some of the sex scenes I remember, I'm like, oh my god. And so like, I just think there's I just said, I'm on that. I'm
To be fair, I started out writing erotic fiction. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was published, it's out there, so. And so you say you're working on the adaptation of Queenie, so you're writing the screenplay as well for the TV series?
Yes, at the moment, yes.
And how are you finding that as a discipline? Obviously they're two different ways of writing. Do you feel like you gravitate towards one more than the other?
Screenwriting is just hard because there's lots of people involved. And with the novel, you just sort of like write it, and then it'll be like, okay, so change that, and that, because that doesn't make sense, and put that there. But you have like 10 meetings about screenwriting before you've even written anything. And it's like, why are we talking about that? So there is that all the time. And that is, it's just long.
There's more eyes on each aspect of it. Okay. Interesting.
It's fun.
All sorts of you've got all sorts of amazing things going on with this. But I feel like we're probably a bit early, but do people want to start doing the awkward thing where they're like, no, I don't have any questions, and then everyone has a million questions? Who wants to ask a question? We've got a hand here and here too. Let's go there first. Do we need to pass mic? Do we have to shout?
I was going to say, you've spoken a lot about what people have said to you, about what they've learned about themselves, and even within it, it's a lot of like learning and growing with the book. Is there anything that you would say you've learned about yourself, or something that you felt like you've grown from writing it and the journey after success of Queenie and that kind of thing?
Thank you, it's a great question. What have I learned about myself? I still don't like public speaking, I find it very scary. But I can do it, which is quite distressed. And I was like, "You okay? What's wrong?" And she was like, "Well, I just almost finished the book and it's really upset me. It's really painful." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm really, really sorry." And we spoke about that for a while, and I just hadn't realised that because I find it easy to write such raw and quite painful scenes that actually they could be quite damaging to someone. And so I guess I think I've learned that my threshold for that sort of thing is obviously a lot higher, and I should approach with caution because I haven't really considered that. And that's like the main thing that I've realised. And so I don't like feel like actively bad about it, but I'm just really aware of it, if that makes sense. That's like for me. Sometimes I think about it and I'm like, oh God.
I mean, personally, sorry, I know there's no comments or things, but personally, I definitely feel like it massively spoke to me because you've just really touched on the whole single thing. It's so spot on, like in terms of what it's like to date and the whole giving yourself out for sex without actually enjoying it. And I think that was the biggest thing, but it didn't distress me. I was like, oh my God, yes, like that's the first book I've ever read that's hit the nail on the head. So
Thank you.
yeah, that's
How do statements like that make you feel? Because I feel like I've heard a lot of people say that they hadn't read something that spoke to them so specifically. Do you feel like that's nailed it, or how do you feel about that?
Well, it's hard. It's like I'm conflicted because I'm like it's really amazing, but it's also really shit. So many of us feel like that. So it's like it's really nice to hear that someone like can see themselves, but it's also a situation that so many of us find ourselves in. It's like stop it.
Yeah.
Not as in like not like society.
Yeah.
Well, like that's what you want.
We have a question, Christine?
yeah. Why don't you want to do music?
Why is it music? It just feels really. I think because I would have to read it knowing that other people have read it, and if I see something that I don't like, it will make me cringe to death. And so, like I think I caught a bit of BBC Sounds of it, and I was like, oh my God, you read that? How awful! So it's just like me just not being able to do that. But I remember I read not an interview. There's like a thing that Zadie Smith did in the Guardian. It was like books that matter, and someone the question was like, what book do you wish you'd written? And she was like, I wish I could know about and rewrite White Teeth. And I can I would love to just like give. I mean, I wouldn't because I haven't got the time. I can't bother. I was like give Queenie like a once over. But then I didn't have to do that because I think it would be less. It would be less exciting.
I have a question, but just quickly want to say thank you so much for this book. It was so refreshing to see like people like us in a mainstream book. I'm with my friends who've read it, we discussed it, and we just had the most amazing time talking about the book. But my question is, do you have any advice for black aspiring writers?
Advice for black aspiring writers. So I would say first of all, if you ever think that your story isn't valid, know that it is, because that's what I battled with for a really long time. I didn't see myself in books. And I would just write with no abandon. Like I would just write stuff down like when it takes you. You don't have to have a plan for it. You don't have to have a publisher in mind. I think the first thing you need to do is just get a story out. I think that's the most important thing. And then when you do have that, if you have done that, then talk to people about it and share your work with people that you know and trust. That was definitely part of my process. The first draft of Queenie to like 4 friends, and I was like, can you just critique it to like the hilt, please? Because I think you're gonna have to do that as it goes on anyway. And then, I mean, if you want to then look at an agent, this just gets quite boring now, so I can talk about it later. But yeah, I would say like the first thing is just like know that you should write your story, and just like wherever you are, like just write notes down and just think about like strengthen your world as much as possible, and really know who's in it and what you want to say. I think knowing what you want to say is the most important thing. But I can talk to you after about actual like practical stuff. It's not boring.
Hi, I feel really bad because I haven't read the book, but there's a reason. The reason is partly because I haven't read any novels in a while. I question to you is, what is your writing process? So, are you a Toni Morrison who wakes up at 4 a.m. and does writing before they go to work? Are you, as you said, write down on notes? What is your process and how do you deal with self-doubt?
Dealing with self-doubt is just being like, it's here, so here it is, and let's just sit with it, because it happens often. But in terms of process, I just lock myself away and write, so I'm quite intense about it. And I can only write at night time, so I just spend the whole day just walking around my flat being like, what do I need to clean today? Should I rearrange that? But then when it gets to like 10 p.m, I'm like, maybe I can sit down, and then at like 11, 12, I'm like, oh, and then I look up and it's like 7 a.m. So that is how I tend to do things, which I wouldn't recommend. But I think in terms of like self-doubt or writer's block, it's just about like pushing through that, and I try not to look at like a blank page. So I won't start a chapter like I'll like think about what in the chapter I'm excited about, and then I'll write that, because that's where that's where my head is, and then I'll kind of go back and do the rest of it. So I try not to spend too much time looking at anything like, well, what isn't there that's going to stress me out. But we all have different ways and different processes, and I think all are fine. And I think, writing goals are great, but if you don't reach them, if you don't do like 1,000 words a day, then that's fine, because you don't want to do 1,000 words nonsense and have to delete it, because it's just a waste of like brain, time and energy.
And just to add, I do actually have a book. I bought it. I will read it. And the second point is, I'm also a therapist. So now that I know that you've got that aspect to your book, I actually want to say thank you for that therapy point as well, because it is really important.
Do you want any more clients?
No, no.
I have a question, but I just wanted to thank your friend Julian first, because that's how I learnt about the book. And then I passed it to my mom and my friends, and they all loved it, but they're not here tonight. But I wanted to ask you how, after writing such a raw book, you kind of protect your personal life as a writer, because I self-publish my own book, and people are like, how much of that is true? Like, give me a percentage, and I'm like, no, it's my book, and that's fiction. But does that happen to you, and if so, how do you kind of deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Shout to Julian, who's here. So most people think I am Queenie, which is really annoying. I didn't even know it, everyone just kept calling me Queenie, which was so irritating. So that was hard, because I've seen lots of plays and read lots of books, and like two of my friends are playwrights, I've seen their plays, and at no point did I, having not known them really at the beginning, think that was about them. I was just like, what a great piece of art you've made. So I think that when women write stories, I think there is this understanding that we don't have imagination, so that we must just be drawing on our own pain, which is mad. It just doesn't, in a way that. But my response to that is that Ian McEwan has written a book called Nutshell, and I'm always like, is he a fetus? And so, yeah, I think interviews are quite hard, because I get asked a lot of personal questions. And so, like, everyone, I suppose that interviews have a job to do that, but I think even more so, I get asked a lot about race as well, which is, I've written about race, so I should be prepared to talk about race, but it is, it comes up so much. And I guess the thing I get asked is mad is about how to sort of tackle race in the publishing industry. And it's like, again, I'm an author who has a background in marketing, so that's not my, I'm not a racial strategist for that sort of thing. So I think it's that, but I think, I'm quite open though about lots of things, because I don't really have many deep secrets. So yeah, I think but that's just because I don't mind talking about my stuff if I think it's going to help someone else to understand, which is why I didn't mind writing about certain topics in Queenie if I thought it would open up conversations. But I do think that we should protect ourselves as writers. But I think I'm just someone who's like, well, if I can be helpful in any way, that's fine. But not everyone is like that, and that's absolutely fine.
Is that something that you've really given much thought to before the book came out? I mean, it's not really something you necessarily consider that you might have to sort of start mining your own personal like when people interview you and ask you questions, have you considered sort of just doing a JD Salinger and being like, I don't do interviews, I don't interact with the public, or is it's important to you to put your own story out there as well?
I think mainly just because of the space that we're in. So I think like in this like social media age, I think it would be really, really hard to do that. I think it's really hard to do that, but also so many authors that I admire have just done that, and I think it's important because I think that it means there is an authenticity to the story.
Maybe less of a projection, people aren't sort of projecting a certain image onto the book. And
And also just like in a technical sense, it's really nice to come and like meet people and talk about stuff. And I guess I get lots of people talking to me about the stuff that they've gone through, and it's hard because again you don't want people to be going through stuff, but at least they have an outlet to talk about things, or like they feel seen in some way, and that's important. So I wouldn't not do it just because that means a lot to me.
More questions?
So I'm a teacher, and although I don't teach English, I remember reading the book and being like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And I noticed that a lot of my girls are kind of looking for stories that resonate a lot like, because although I didn't tell them about what the book was about, it's a bit, mature for them. I was telling them how it, spoke to me. And one of the girls was saying that she's never read a story where she's seen herself reflected in the story, can relate to the, the family dynamics, the situations going on in her life, etc., etc. Have you ever considered, or would you ever consider putting out a YA version of Queenie in the future?
That's a great question. Again, I think about sex. No. No, so that's a really good question. I'm going to write YA, but it's not going to be that. But I think all of the stories that I write are so centred on the human experience and on the black woman's experience that I don't think I have to write a Queenie like that. I think it would kind of be in its own form. But that's a really interesting. I'm trying to think because I'd have to strip so much of it away from it being different. You know what I mean when I say strip things away. But I think would it be the same thing? I don't know if it would be the same thing, because if she were like 13, 14, then it'd be a different thing. Because the things. So I read a lot of Louise Renison when I was growing up, and a lot of like the Adrian Mole books by Susanna. And what I loved about those was that innocence and purity of being a teenager and navigating things for the first time. And also, I think the idea of love that you have when you're a teen is a very different thing to when you're like in your 20s and you're navigating what love actually is and what it means, and that it's not the thing that you see with your parents or what you see on TV. And so I think that innocence of youth when it comes to love, I think Queenie's way past that. And so maybe I could do a prequel. Maybe I could write her mum's book. Oh my god, I'm not.
More questions? Over there? Just there?
No.
That's okay.
I have the assumption that I feel nowadays, because of the social media age, because women are a lot more vocal and present, that publishing a book, you have a lot more say than previously in terms of the publisher directing you, giving you notes. Were you able to pretty much write what you wanted, or were there times where you had to sort of say, I really want this, or sort of fight something that you were encouraging you not to keep the book?
I take a lot of sets out of the book, genuinely, but that was fine. I think that was for the best. But I had an amazing editor, and I think when I was choosing, I chose between 4 editors, which is very lucky. Not everyone has that. But I chose the editor who made me laugh the most and also scared me the most, because I knew that I would listen to what she said. And I think it's about trust, and it's about knowing that someone has you in mind and understands you. And I went with an editor who really understands me. She just walked in. And then she said, why is your name? An editor who really understands this girl who's going to make a lot of bad decisions was important. But there was nothing that I had to, there was not really, there's nothing that I had to fight for, just because I was working with a team who just understood exactly what Queenie was. So yeah, it was a good time.
Was there anything you had to explain to people that they didn't understand in terms of like terminology or anything? I suppose you get it in your book anyway.
No, I didn't, which is really nice. I get some DMs from people. I got one, someone was like, what does in it mean? But yeah, apart from that, that's been it. No, I didn't miss anything different. Everyone's just great. Everyone's just been great. I feel very, very, very lucky. I feel very lucky.
Hiya. I'm from South East London. I've come a long way. So it's really nice to read a book from someone who's set a lot in Brixton. And you talk a lot about gentrification and Brixton market and things like that, which I really relate to, going somewhere and finding, it's become a fancy cafe or something like that. So if you could just, talk about why that's important for you to bring in. That'd be great.
Cool, thank you for that question. So I grew up in Streatham and then moved to Lewisham and then have lived in about 15 houses. But I'm born to be Lewisham, but I remember Brixton when I was growing up because that's where we would still go every Saturday to do the proper shop. Sorry. So what can I say? That's not ethnic shopping. But I had to do the Saturday Brixton market. But because I moved around a lot, I just had a few different homes and different experiences. I found Brixton Market very tethering. And so when I started going back there as I got older, I found it much harder and I felt like parts of me were being stripped away when the places that I would go to were no longer there. And that does do things too. It does erode parts of it, erodes bits of your history because if you're going somewhere that you've always been, like with your nan or with your mum, and these places that they just feel part of you when they go. So like with no word, it's kind of like you go back expecting to see this familiar space and it's just gone. It's like, no, say goodbye. And so I found that really hard, and so I really wanted to translate that into the book and this understanding of this person and her value and how she sees herself and parts of her going away. When actually her whole foundation is being rocked in that book because her relationship has ended and stuff. Her mum is really painful and really hard, and so all of those past placements and things she's holding on to are just going. And I see the change in Brixton now. I live down the road from Brixton, and I see the changes now all the time, and it is really, really wild. And also, like Peckham, which is just down the road, there are loads of amazing artists who used to just do hair, but now in tiny shops, but now they can't do it because they've just been priced out. And so what we see is communities disappearing, and we see fixtures of places disappearing. And I don't know what that means. I mean, it doesn't really mean terrible things for the area, but also means that same with Elephant Castle and the shopping centre, and that's really painful because it's communities that are being just broken up and illegal.
It's really interesting that you touched on associating it with a particular memory of childhood. Like if you associate that thing with your mother or your grandmother and that is being stripped away, it's like, what else are you losing besides just the physical thing? Where you can't buy, plantains, whatever. Plantain, you can't buy food for a pound. It's not just that. It's something more essential, as you say. That's a really interesting point. Who has another question? I think we might have to come back around. Keep it around. Just there, in fact.
You talked about not wanting to read it again because you would want to be worried about missing something out or want to redo it or anything. Now you're doing the screenplay for the TV series. Is there anything you're tempted to add or change or sneak in or something?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So the question that I get just people on the street is why doesn't Queenie go out with black men? And it's in there. She's stressed and she's scared. Because that is not what she's understood, you know, and I find it we get quite annoyed. I'm usually really good with questions, I'm always like really gracious, and because I'm just like, read the book. But so now that I write the screenplay, I was like, I think she needs a black love interest, like early on. But that is also just because, like, selfishly, that means I get to cast that. I'm just looking at but no, so there was like, so basically I've listened to what people have said, and I'm trying to not like redress everything, because I know why I wrote the story, but I think like in TV I think you get a chance to do things a little bit differently, but keep the same. I mean, like, keep the bones of it, and so I guess that is what I can do with this, and so that's what I'm doing, for that. So there's that, and also just like I think the TV show is going to be sort of like a companion to the book rather than a complete retelling, which is quite fun, because it means I get to put different elements in there, but like keep most of the same ideas. So yeah, just more men is the.
Amazing. How are we doing for time? Okay, any more questions? Right.
Actually, I want to probe you a bit on that, actually, because there were points in the book where I was like, find you a black king, like, what's going on? Actually, having conversations with my friends, because I feel like it's really difficult for black girls feeling like, do black boys like me? Like, do I want to try something like that whole dynamic?
So it was like, yeah.
So yeah, I wondered if you wanted to just like explore why you made that choice a bit more about these racial dating choices.
Yeah, so actually I had an argument in my DMs this morning about that. I was speaking to my hairdresser, and I was like, this guy had been like, oh, I see that you hate black men. And I was like, whoa, no I don't. And then he was like, is it because black men call you ugly at school? And then I was like, no. No one called me ugly. And he was like, no, I don't mean that personally, I just think it's a trope that happens. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So we just had like an argument about that when I was under the steamer.
You have time.
But I was basically, I was shooting my head at it. But so I was like, it's not my responsibility to represent you, write your own book if you want to do that. And I blocked it. Sorry, I've gone off piece, but I blocked it to at least get it out. And created a new page. And I was like, you have time today. And then I started, I didn't continue. But I do think that is the case. So I basically, but one of my things to him was that it is about a young black woman who is existing in a white space. And a space that is like white in terms of her schooling, in terms of university, and in terms of where she works. And that is so many of us are like that. I think it takes a long time to find like a big set. Like how often do you find like big sets of like women who are like that? I think it takes a long time. And so with that in mind, it was about the men that she has around her, the ones that are literally around her. But I think, I mean, I can't speak for everyone's like attraction and who they want to be with, but I think that when you understand what handsomeness is, or like what chivalry is, or what like a man is, and I think, you know, when it's dictated to you, that it's like, what's his name? What's it not? Like all these handsome, like
Prince Charming.
Are you talking about the Robert Pattinson thing where they said it's the latest one?
This is what I mean. Like, when you like with society surgery, that's like the thing. And kind of like that's the thing. Okay, I guess that's the thing. But also it's just like it's about taste, and I can't speak for everyone's taste. But I think like for Queenie, that is a marker of being like, this guy is so far away from. This guy is so far away from what I have suffered with, and that is these types of men. And so that's that specific experience in the book. But I do also understand that with like lots of my friends, it's the same thing. They're kind of like, well, I don't think that. But then I was like arguing with my black girlfriends who were like, I don't think certain types of black girls would like me, and it's like I can't get into it. So I think like just conversations need to be had, and I can't be the only one. interracial relationships that are great. And so it's like I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to sit and say like, you're bad and that's not something that she should aspire to. And so when I get people telling me that I should have done that differently, what she should do with a black man, it's like, you don't know her. And I very much do. So I'm really not so yeah, but that's a really valid point. And it's like, you know, it's my story for the telling, and it's how I see her world. And so I can't change it to fit every group of humanity. But I can, you know, use the TV show to do different things.
One more question.
Joe was just like,
sorry. What do you reckon? How quick is the question right in the back corner? Back corner, I saw your hand. No, you don't want to anymore?
When you were just saying a bit about Queenie's world, it made me think that when I was reading it, often I felt like a big sister, because I was like, what are you doing? Just stop this now. Did you ever feel like that creating her, like creating that kind of pain and struggle? Trying to think of what I'm going to ask.
No, you just lost it. No, you lost it. That's right. Yeah, all the time. She's really annoying. But I think like I just had to put her through stuff, and she very much like did what she was doing. As I said, I didn't have any plan for her, but she'd do stuff and I'd be like, wow, that's awesome. But yeah, it was very much that. Like that was just her experience, and that's the journey that she was taking on. And she had to do. I guess that she had to just do a lot of reckless and wild stuff to understand the person that she is, and to understand that that doesn't feel good and that isn't good for me. And I think that we all have to do that. I think we've all done those things, and that's okay, because I think everything that we do and every interaction is about learning and about understanding ourselves. And I think that Queenie did that, and she learned a lot of things the hard way. But I think that she had to go through that journey, and it was a painful one, and also a painful one to write as well. But I think the understanding and I guess the reality that it's often darkest before the dawn is a very real thing, and I really wanted to put that on the page and have her go through that, so that anyone who reads it understands that yeah, that is true, but at the end everything will be like not perfect, but it'll be alright.